Architecture is so much more than just pretty buildings. At its heart, it's really about solving these incredibly complex spatial puzzles, taking a totally blank page and turning it into a living, breathing space. So how does an idea actually become a reality? Let's get into it.
So really, how does a building begin? You might think it all starts with some flash of genius, right? A perfect sketch appearing out of nowhere. But that's not really how it works. The real beginning is actually way more strategic and methodical.
Yeah, and this quote really hits the nail on the head. The secret to great design isn't just about raw talent. It's the process. Having a disciplined, high-quality workflow, that's what separates a building you forget from one that becomes a landmark. So here's how we're going to break down that journey. We'll look at the 4 key stages. We'll start before a single line is even drawn, then we'll see how the idea starts to take shape, how it's actually made buildable, and finally how architects tell that building's story.
All right, let's dive into that first and maybe most critical phase, the power of analysis. This is all about getting a deep understanding of the world a building is going to exist in, long before anyone even starts thinking about what it's going to look like.
One of the biggest mistakes you can make is just jumping right into the creative stuff, just starting to sketch. But truly successful design isn't born from some random flash of inspiration. It's born from really rigorous data collection. You have to understand the puzzle before you can even begin to solve it.
So what are we talking about here? We're talking about all these invisible forces that totally shape a building. Where the sun goes throughout the day, that dictates light and heat. Wind patterns, they influence ventilation. I mean, think about it. Knowing the low winter sun path in, say, Norway might lead you to design huge south-facing windows. But in Arizona, that same knowledge would demand deep overhangs to create shade. These aren't just technical details. They're the key ingredients that define how it feels to actually be in that space. Okay, so you've got all this data. Now what? How does all that analysis actually start to look like, well, a building? Let's jump to our next section and see how that data gets transformed into a core concept.
This is where a super powerful tool comes in, the party diagram. Just think of it like the project's DNA, or maybe like the one-sentence summary of a whole novel. It's not a floor plan, it's a really simple, powerful sketch that gets across the single biggest idea of the design. Are we building a courtyard to block out street noise? Are we lifting the building up off the ground to create a public plaza underneath? The party shows you that in an instant.
And as we start to figure out the inside, we run into this absolutely brilliant idea from the legendary architect Louis Kahn. He split spaces into 2 simple categories. The served, which are the main event rooms, where we live and work, and the servant spaces. Those are the stairs, the storage, the mechanical systems that make the other rooms work. It's a simple concept, but it creates buildings that just feel logical and intuitive to be in.
So you can really see the logic play out, right? You analyze the site, you develop that core concept or party, you turn the zoning rules into a basic 3D shape, and then you start carving away to let in light and create ways to move through it. It's a process of refinement, not just random invention.
All right, so now we have a concept, it looks great, it's clever, but here's the million-dollar question. Can you actually build it? This is where we make that huge leap from an abstract idea to a technical reality.
And the key tool for this is what's called BIM. That's Building Information Modeling. Now, a 3D model, that's just geometry. BIM is way, way more. It's a dynamic database where every single element, a wall, a window, a beam, knows what it is and how it relates to everything else. You're basically building the entire building virtually before you ever break ground.
And why is this such a game changer? Well, the benefits are just massive. With BIM, you can test the structure, you can make sure the plumbing isn't trying to run through an electrical conduit, you can catch all these potential collisions before a single dollar is spent on the actual site. It's the ultimate reality check that makes sure a beautiful idea doesn't turn into a construction nightmare.
Okay, let's move on to our final section. And you could argue this is the most important part of the whole process. You have a great, buildable design. Now you have to convince someone, a client, a jury, a community, that it's the right one. You have to tell its story.
So our source material says something really cool. It calls the exploded axonometric the architect's secret weapon. That's a pretty big statement, right? So what is this thing and why is it so powerful?
Well, this is it. And what it does is pretty amazing. Unlike a simple flat floor plan, an exploded axonometric, well, it basically pulls the entire building apart layer by layer. It's almost like the instruction manual for a really complex Lego set. It shows you not just the final thing,
but how all the different pieces fit together. It lets you understand the entire building in 3D, all in a single glance.
So in just one single image, you get the whole story. You see how people move up and down through the building. You understand how the structure holds up the exterior walls. You can see how the public spaces are kept separate from the private ones. It shows you how all these individual parts come together to create one unified whole. The entire story, right there in one drawing.
And this brings up a really important point. When you get to that final presentation, the goal isn't just to make something that looks real. It's about creating an atmosphere. You're trying to sell a feeling. The way the light's going to hit a wall, the warmth of the materials. That's what creates an emotional connection. People buy into a vision, not just a set of drawings.
And that really brings us full circle to this quote, which perfectly sums up the entire process. It's all about balance. You have to start with that rigorous left brain work of analysis, but you absolutely have to finish with the artistic right brain work of telling a beautiful, compelling story. One without the other is always going to feel incomplete.
So I want to leave you with a question. The next time you walk into a building, doesn't matter if it's your home, your office, a coffee shop, whatever, now that you've seen the process, what part of its hidden story are you going to look for first? The hard analysis behind its shape, or the emotional story it's trying to tell?